But I want to thank everyone for being here today. Today is Veterans Day, so I do want to start off with a quick moment to just say thank you to for the service to all the veterans who may be watching, and I want to remind everyone to please thank those veterans in their office today if you haven't already. Today we're celebrating the end of the fighting in World War I, as well as all the members of our armed forces, both past and present. So just want to keep that in mind today, as it is a special day. And speaking of special days, it is also the birthday of one of our panelists, Mr. Bill Richmond. So I am going to start off with your bio, Mr. Richmond. Bill is the founder and managing partner of Platt, Chima, and Richmond, PLLC. Mr. Richmond's practice focuses on representing entrepreneurs and companies in litigation and at trial regarding business agreements, real estate transactions, and contracts, and related to corporate disputes. Prior to founding PCR, Mr. Richmond practiced at an international defense firm and subsequently a business litigation boutique. He is, from 2018 to 2020, named to D Magazine's list of best lawyers under 40, as well as being selected by D Magazine as a best lawyers in Dallas for business litigation 2016 to 2019. And Bill also has experience working with title and doing real estate closings. And now Mr. Ryan Bowerly, he is a partner at Goranson Bain, is it Osley or Osley? Osley. And Mr. Bowerly's practice focuses on family law. He's a skilled litigator and strong negotiator, and he regularly obtains favorable settlements without even having to set foot in the courthouse, which I think everyone appreciates, especially your clients. You are board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in Family Law. Ryan has also been recognized as a Super Lawyers Rising Star 2020 and named a Best Lawyers Ones to Watch in 2020. So those are some good moments in this year of pandemic. He is also selected the chair of the Family Law Committee and liaison to the section of Family Law, American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division. Ryan has also recently been elected by the Texas Young Lawyers Association as director to District 4. Ryan is fellow with the Texas Bar Foundation, has served as the the State Bar of Texas in multiple capacities. And of course, last but not least, Mr. Tony Barbieri is the president and shareholder of Kessler Collins PC. As president of Kessler Collins, Tony's 20-year legal practice spans many disciplines. Tony's experience is largely centered around mergers and acquisitions and private equity financing. Tony's practice also involves advising clients regarding all aspects of their business, including complex real estate transactions, corporate employment, intellectual property rights, as well as data privacy related areas. Whether he is negotiating a merger or representing a client in a business dispute, Tony is a strategic problem solver committed to the success of the firm's clients. Tony leverages his extensive experience to provide insightful legal services on a broad range of matters beyond just legal counsel. Tony's focus is on a client's ultimate business objectives and crafting efficient and effective solutions. As a result of his experience and strong client relationships, Tony fills the role of outside general counsel to a wide range of mid-market, high-performance companies in various industries. And I am your moderator today. My name is Taylor Wilson, and I am a partner with Bennett Weston, LeJohn & Turner, and my practice is in corporate law. So we already got a happy birthday, Bill, in the Q&A. So I'm gonna say we answered that one live. And I'm gonna go ahead and start. I apologize. I've had some technical difficulties today, so hopefully everyone can see and hear me just fine. But I wanted to go ahead and start question one. I'm going to ask Tony to start. There's so many different irons in the fire when you're running a firm, and technology, which I'm having issues with today, is supposed to make all of our lives easier. How do you pick the right technology for your firm, and how has your technology in your firm changed this year?
Well, thanks, Taylor. Thank you for asking the first question. I also want to echo your sentiments and thank all the veterans, those who are hopefully joining us and across the country. Appreciate your service and your commitment to our country so that we have the freedom to do what we're doing. So sincerely appreciate that. To answer your question, this is technology is kind of a, a cool thing for me, because before I was a legal geek, I was a technology geek. I was in college, I was a finance and computer science major. And my first real job out of college, I was working for a software design and development company here in Dallas. And so I was actually out there designing and developing software for financial institutions, believe that or not. And so when I look at IT solutions now, I look at it from a totally different view. I remember going out to client sites many years ago and trying to sell them software, and you do a lot of things to get someone to buy your technology. So if you don't have a background in that area, that's fine, but you should get somebody on your team that does, or someone that you trust to help you out. And that's definitely key. The other thing I would say is do your due diligence. And by due diligence, I mean, don't just listen to what the vendor has to say. What we do before we acquire technology is we sit down and we look at the need. First of all, we figure out what do we need here, and do we need this technology? We make sure that it's in our budget, that we can do it, and then we set out and we look for potential vendors to get it done. And then from the diligence standpoint, we will ask the vendor who else is using the software, and specifically somebody local. And we will call over there and we will ask them what it's like to actually use the software in real life. And we'll see, and it helps to have a firm that's compatible with your practice. If you have a law firm with 20 lawyers and you're calling up a law firm with 1,000 lawyers and asking them what their experience is, it may not be compatible with yours. And when we talk to other law firms about this technology, we ask them, not only the end users, how it works, but we also ask the back end folks, like how is it dealing with all the with the accounting and the processing of the invoices. And this is important because we were looking for a vendor as far as document production, trial prep, and we had it narrowed down a while ago, and we talked to some other law firms, and we talked to the lawyers and the paralegals, and they loved it. But yet the accounting folks at the law firms could not get the vendor to give them invoices that they can submit to their clients. And so that technology was it just wouldn't work. So you really have to do your due diligence and figure out if it's the right fit. I've had people tell me that it's a lot of time to do this due diligence, but believe me, if you pick the wrong technology, the time and money you'll spend on it is going to be way more than the diligence. So there you go.
Great. And we already actually have a question about technology. So how do you use a specific type of software to handle conflict checks, or do you use your accounting software? What do you recommend?
We actually use one of our existing software platforms that we use for billing, and it's sort of like a CRM tool. It's a software application called Coyote, and we recently just switched over to that platform for conflict checks, and it's a very user-friendly system where it does an electronic search through all of our files and through our CRM software. And then it will send out an email to all the timekeepers and all the lawyers to make sure that there's no conflict. So not only are we asking people to physically look at the conflicts, but we're having that back end technology work for us. This is actually, we had, truth be told, we acquired this software for our timekeeping and our billing, and we were looking for a vendor that would help us with conflict checks, and lo and behold, the software we had already did it, and we weren't aware of that functionality, and so they were able to get that implemented pretty quickly for us.
That's always good to hear.
Yeah.
Ryan, do you have anything to add about technology at your firm and how it might differ from what they're doing at Kessler Collins?
Sure. And again, I would echo what Tony said regarding the veterans. We're thankful for all those who served, and y'all allow us to do what we do. And I would also echo what Tony said regarding trying it out and doing your research. The way we handle it at Gorence and Bain is we have little firm committees set up for things like this. So there's a technology committee, which somehow I'm serving on. And it includes not just the people that actually go out and do the research, but it's a combination of lawyers, which consists of partners, associates, and paralegals. So, for example, this past year, we switched to we're switching to a new billing software effective January 1, and then we switched just kind of to a more effective cloud-based software for saving all our firm documents and everything like that as well. So, everything is pretty heavily vetted. And then even when it comes out of committee, usually what people will do is somebody in charge will draw the short stick and get to send out the email to the firm asking for feedback. And some people's opinions, or everybody's opinion is to be treated equally. And as a practical matter, sometimes like a paralegal who might be saving more documents, if they have concerns about something, it might matter more to them than it might matter for me, who's just, it's not unusual for me to draft something and I'll ask my paralegal to save it somewhere. So if it's a problem for them, then it ultimately becomes a problem for the firm. So just doing your research on it and then testing, and then, ultimately making the decision. I think it has to be a team effort, because what you'll end up with is unhappy employees if everybody else isn't at least like given the opportunity to voice their opinion about it, or maybe even give it a try.
Thanks. And Bill, I know that you have an up and coming firm that is just growing. So I'm not even sure if we can say that you're a small firm anymore, but I under the impression that you might not have a separate accounting division within your firm. How do you handle technology, especially when, you're growing at a rate that maybe you have to up your licenses and all of the things that go with technology?
We have definitely grown a lot. We're now at 16 lawyers and have a combination of both transactional and litigation. So we're covering commercial real estate, corporate, intellectual property, social media, we have tax, and a few other areas, labor and employment. And one of the things I was going to say is making sure that during your testing phase, you just can't get past it. If you don't do the testing and do some practical vetting of how you're going to actually use it, and use it at all levels, whether it's on the administrative side, the staff side, the attorney side, or all combinations thereof, you're going to run into problems at some point. But making sure that you can branch out to make it universal amongst the firm. Now, that's not necessarily a requirement. For example, our transactional attorneys, my background is traditionally litigation. Our transactional attorneys use a certain document editing software that the litigators to a T have never heard of and don't use. And so we have a certain number of licenses that they have for that section, and that the paralegals in those sections use, versus some other software that the litigation team uses. We use a particular project management software on the litigation side called Asana, which is not legal specific, but we have tooled it into a way that makes it great for us to manage cases, deadlines, and other things like that. And we went through, I would say, a 90 day process where we tried it out. We went through, we've made some, a lot of thinking ahead of time about what exactly are we going to use it for, and how does it make our life easier? Because one of the things that's critical is you can have a lot of amazing features, but if you can't implement them, or they create 9 steps where there used to be 3 steps, it isn't actually saving you any time. And of course, as a lawyer, time, and like anyone, any professional, time is really your most valuable commodity. If you don't do that investment up front in testing, and you don't do practical applications of it, you're going to most likely have a problem at some point down the road. One of the other things that I would say that I really have to echo is the recommendation that you get a recommendation, and a real life recommendation. If you can find people that are doing it, even with non-legal specific software, likely there is someone in a law firm somewhere, whether big, small, or medium, that has tried to use that software. And you can find those kinds of reviews online. And each practice is a little different. So it may have not worked, for example, a family law practice or a trademark practice, but it might work for a commercial real estate practice. So it really is tailored to your specific needs. The other thing to consider is, when you're looking at national companies, is understanding the costs of support. There may be a place where you're saying, oh, great, this software is really easy to use, it's awesome, it's great, and we have some thrown in customization, but then later you find out down the road, calling into the national call center is going to cost you $100, $150 an hour, and you're having to call all the time. you can usually head that off by having your real life recommendation, but then also understanding, is there local support? Are there implementers that are local? I'm particularly thinking of document production and e-discovery software that ends up being free because they're trying to implement the software and they get a cut on the back end, whereas going directly to the national company may not be as helpful, and you have to call them for getting support. So a lot of different things, and we have changed a lot. We still use the same website that I built 5 years ago when we founded the firm. Obviously, we've updated a little bit in terms of look, but we don't use our website to generate business. It's really a validation tool for people who have been referred to us. So we have tailored it to create what we need for the purposes that we're implementing in our particular practices.
And you really led us into the next question, which is how do you use technology to bring in clients? You just mentioned that your website is more of confirmation. So what kind of technology are you using, or are you using any technology to bring in clients?
I would say from the business development perspective, in our particular firm, we're a group of mid-sized and large firm refugees that are doing, high-level work that is particular for a smaller group of clients as opposed to a volume practice. So there are a lot of great volume practices out there that need to use their websites for lead generation, and that's not what we're doing. The vast majority of our clients are referrals from other lawyers or clients. And so when they have already heard the name, the first thing they do is they go look it up and they go say, oh, how am I going to get hold of this person? They're very critical. And then are they the person that's going to have the kind of practice areas that I need and the kind of special, either specialties, if you're specialized, or focus or experience in the areas that we need. And then you can get beyond that to talk about rates and other things. From a technology standpoint, we do most of our marketing is in-house. We have an individual who helps with that, and I oversee the business development aspect. So putting together social media posts, scheduling those out, using things like Constant Contact or other CRM software to make sure you can get out information very quickly. And of course, as people are seeing more recently, a lot of implementation and making sure people are familiar with all kinds of video conferencing. I mean, I have seen a full gamut from firms that have created specific rooms that are perfect for that, down to folks who are just making sure that they have a good camera, a good sound. They know how to test it. They can put a background on if they need to. They know how to screen share, and making sure that your folks across the board can do that. And I think that's one of the best ways to market. One other kind of maybe non-traditional type way to market is we have done a lot of things like working with wineries in Napa who were for a long time shut down, and we got with them, had their winemakers host virtual wine tastings for our clients and referral sources, where we get the wine delivered, we deliver it to people locally, everyone's tasting the same wines but from the safety of their own home, but there's a guided tour at the winery with the person who's doing it through Zoom. So thinking outside of the box is something that technology is allowing us to do. And you don't have to be locked into the traditional ways that people were marketing, and oftentimes not using technology at all.
We have a question that came in specifically for you and your use of your website for validation. Are there any web options, I'm assuming like SEO or other things, that you choose not to spend money on, or that you choose to emphasize?
So we deliberately do not do any type of SEO, mainly because SEO is mostly good for lead generation. Very rarely is someone saying commercial real estate attorney in Texas, right? That's usually not happening. It does happen sometimes, but the kind of money that's required to make that effective is not the space that we're playing in. Unfortunately, our word of mouth referrals keep us busy enough that we don't need that. But if you are looking to branch out or even kind of kick something off, it might be a better place to buy Google AdWords or certain SEO strategies that could make that work. For us, it's mainly, again, we're just looking at people who either find us through referrals, and they either look us up on LinkedIn and then go to our website and again look at our backgrounds, or they go to the website and then give us a call.
Great. And Ryan, I think you have the most unique type of practice in terms of what would be completely different from what Bill just answered. And correct me if I'm wrong, family law, it is a little bit more quantity. So can you talk about how you use technology to bring in new clients in that type of firm?
Sure. So the most obvious one is we have an internet presence, and we've got pretty detailed bios for all the different attorneys at Gorins and Maine. We also have social media accounts for the firm: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Almost all the individual attorneys have professional accounts as well. So I have a professional Facebook account. So that's going to obviously have different stuff, which I might send on my personal account. As a practical matter too, when you're dealing with people, I think teaming up with others and everybody in the firm kind of promotes everybody else. My wife is really good at sharing the firm accomplishments that ultimately will help originations and getting clients in the door. With the situation that we're in, some of the old ways of going into working and shaking hands just are not feasible. Kind of what Bill said is some of the best referrals we get are from other lawyers in different practice areas or sometimes in other jurisdictions. So the best way we've been able to make that happen, in addition with just word of mouth and getting results, is taking the TYLA meetings and the ADA meetings and all those other organizations that you can plug yourself into virtual. And that way you do have a little bit of a leg up on your own competition. So if I go to a conference full of family lawyers in my jurisdiction, I'm there with all my competitors. They aren't necessarily going to refer me any business unless they want a friend on the other side or if they're conflicted out of something. So what's helpful is if I meet people, I want to be the Texas lawyer from the Louisiana lawyer that they send all their cases to, or I want to make friends with the criminal defense attorney who there's plenty of crossover, as you might expect, in our lines of work. So I want them to send me their criminal cases and I can send them, or vice versa. So building those relationships in the best way we can under the circumstances, I guess, just taking the normal virtual would be what I would suggest in that circumstance.
Great. Tony, do you have anything to add to how you guys use technology to bring in new clients?
So it's a good question. We don't use technology for lead generation, but one thing that we started tinkering with a few years ago, and it's actually worked out really well for us, is we have a lot of clients where we will have an engagement with them. It goes, and most of our clients are ongoing engagements. Occasionally, we have some that engagements conclude, and we don't really talk to the client for a while. Well, what we've done with our CRM tools, we have the ability to go back and find out those clients where we completed the engagement and when last time we talked to them is, and we have ability to set that up with the tickler system so we can reach out to them systematically just to check in and see how they're doing. And that's really actually worked out well. And I'm not trying to tie this into the pandemic, but early on in the pandemic, we actually used that technology to go to some existing clients who we haven't talked to in a while and reach out to them just literally see how they're doing, just see how's business, how's everything. And we had a lot of people, a lot of stories to tell, a lot of kibitzing, but mostly just interacting with them. And frankly, we were able to generate a lot of business that way because they were asking questions about, you keep in mind, this is circa April, May of 2020, so long ago. They're asking questions about reentry protocols. They're asking questions about PPP loans and whatnot. And so we actually were able to get some business that way. But for the most part, it allows us to go in and keep in touch with clients that we already have relationships with. It's hard enough to go out and meet new clients and get them to know you, like you, and trust you. So if you have an existing client, it makes the process that much faster, and the technology allows you to do that. Another thing that a lot of firms do as well is they will have their newsletters or their social media posts tied to various points of contact. And so that will go out on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And that's important because a lot of people will not hire you because you have a newsletter, but a lot of people might forget who you are. But if they see that email every month and someone asks if they have a good lawyer in mind, that helps it helps refresh their recollection. And so those are two ways that I would suggest using technology. In addition to what Bill and Ryan said, those are two other suggestions I would make.
And Taylor, if I could real quick, I want to to kind of coalesce a little bit about what the guys have said and we've all said is technology is merely a tool to achieving the type of, either client generation or lead generation or kind of marketing that you're looking for. But really what it comes down to is there's no magic sauce. I get a lot of questions from not just young lawyers, but even lawyers who were a service partner in a big firm and now they want to generate business at their 10th, 15th, or 20th year, or they're in-house and now they're trying to practice on their own. And really the phrase that has stuck in my mind is thoughtful persistence to stay appropriately top of mind. We're lucky that we're professionals and we're, maybe at some point technology will make us a commodity, but for right now, our judgment is very important and valued. So when someone is looking for legal services, they are already kind of pre-sold on needing someone. So how are they going to decide? They're going to ask someone they know, or they're going to do the person that's top of mind. So either who comes top of mind to them, or who comes top of mind to the person that they ask. So anything that helps you to stay top of mind, whether it's regular posts and, kind of tooting the horn of your firm or your colleagues or having other people to do that is critical. Or as Tony mentioned, just kind of talking to the people you already have in your network. You would be amazed to find that there is business there just laying around if you take that thoughtful persistence to remind people what you do and that they should call you when they have that.
I totally agree with what Bill said. I mean, I am shameless about meeting people and telling people what I do. When you go and you meet people at a barbecue or something like that, and inevitably comes up, what do you do? And you never know how that referral source is going to come around, and either they might need you or somebody else might need you. I did see the question in the comments from Blair Bennett regarding old-fashioned ways, such as Christmas cards. We do that. I send thank you notes, usually with like an Amazon gift card at the conclusion of every case. Or sometimes I send other stuff, kind of depending on what, if I happen to know the client really well during the course of the case, maybe they want something other than that. And usually I include a couple business cards in it, just ask them to think of me. I usually say, hey, if you were satisfied with my services, please feel free to leave me a review on Google or Avvo, just because for the reasons we already discussed, people Google you and they do look at those things.
Sorry, I was muted. Tony, while we're still on the topic of technology, and you were talking about bringing in clients you already had or connections you already have, what do you do about collecting from those clients you already have, especially if it's a problem collecting?
Well, the collection side of it is obviously it's always tough. And one thing that I always tell lawyers is unless that client is paying you a retainer upfront for the entire amount of engagement, you are basically now in the business of underwriting credit risk. Okay. And normally we look for people to give us credit, but when you are allowing a client to pay as they go, that's a credit risk you're underwriting. If you were to go out to a bank and get a loan, that bank is going to do some investigation to make sure that you're a good credit risk. And so I always want to make sure that we do the same thing. And so if we're going to take on engagement without a retainer or with a retainer that's not going to cover the entire engagement, we always want to make sure a couple things. First of all, you have to have a very solid engagement letter in place that not only complies with the Texas rules of ethics, but also is clear and allows you to get out properly if the engagement is not going well. But again, and I know it says before about technology, but you can avoid a lot of mistakes by not even getting into them in the first place. And some cases you turn down happen to be your best cases, right? And so ask questions, make sure you understand and the client understands what they're getting into from a financial obligation, and watch out for red flags. I'll give you a perfect example. If you're talking to a client about a new engagement and you ask the client if they have had any prior law firms, either for that matter or for another matter, and the client tells you that, yes, I go through new law firms about every year, or yes, I've had 2 other lawyers on this case prior to you, those can be red flags, because either that person may be difficult to get along with, that client, or they may not want to pay. And a lot of people will do that. They'll rack up a bill and then they'll just go somewhere else. So definitely do your diligence up front and ask the questions. Most lawyers are skittish about bringing up money. You're so happy to get the client in the door, and if you don't get paid, it just doesn't. It's not even worth really doing the engagement. So you can't be bashful about it. You have to put on your big lawyer clothes and go out there and have the hard conversations and ask the right questions, and that will hopefully help mitigate the risk from the get-go.
Great. And Ryan, do you also try and get a retainer for the full length of litigation, or do you have alternative billing?
So it's difficult to gauge. It's really hard to say because you don't really know what the full cost of litigation is going to be, because that assumes two rational actors, everybody playing by the rules. There are plenty of people who come into my office with a piece of paper that says, hey, my husband and I reached an agreement. Here it is. And all I've got to do is pay for it. And I have plenty of people that come in with that piece of paper only to find out there is no agreement. There never was an agreement. Oh yeah, and it's exactly the exact opposite of what was represented to. So I try and charge an appropriate retainer for the temperature of the case. Sometimes I give people money back, sometimes I don't. For the cases that are high dollar, sometimes, I mean, in my intake, for example, I try and ask, what the parties make, what their assets are if it's a divorce case, and usually you can identify if needed, okay, there's a potential source for attorney's fees should it come to that. Sometimes you have a reasonable attorney on the other side who will say, okay, let's each take, an amount certain out of the party's IRA account to make sure the attorneys are paid in the event there's not just enough cash in the state. So I have a minimum retainer that I set that I charge, even for the most uncontested of uncontested cases, and the rest of it I kind of make up as the conference goes along. And it tends to go up if some of the circumstances that Tony described, where there's attorney number 3 on the case, or if there's an attorney or there's a former attorney that I really like or I'm friends with. So, I mean, I may pick up the phone and reach out to that lawyer and just be like, hey, this guy came and met with me. I saw that, you used to represent him. What am I missing? So, because that won't always come out. So that's what I would offer in this circumstance. But it's hard to predict. Very rarely do you say this is what it will cost you to get divorced, because it's just impossible to predict.
If I could piggyback on what Ryan just said, that's a huge point, is trying to, if the client or potential client has had a prior lawyer and you ask the client to talk to the prior lawyer and they say no, the best thing to do in that case is go buy a pair of running shoes and just run, because that's a huge red flag.
And I would say that I haven't heard the phrase underwriting the credit risk, but I've used the phrase before with clients where they have balked at new clients, right? New clients don't know them, no history, no nothing, and they are like, I don't pay retainers. And you can use different analogies or metaphors to explain it to them. But one of the phrases that I say is, look, I feed my family, I pay the bills by having legal fees, and if I'm not collecting money up front or prepaying for services like most other folks would, or putting a retainer down, then essentially we're a bank at that point, right? Or folks who come in and say, well, can't we float the litigation further? Can we push the bills out? Can we do other things like that? And you'll want to make it work. Unfortunately, that's the gray area where you're like, okay, am I going to trust that this is going to work? Am I trust that the business is going to be there? Am I going to trust that it's coming? But I would very much recommend thinking that if it's already difficult in the beginning, rarely does it get better. If they're already balking at paying, if it's already hard to contemplate initial retainers or reduced retainers, it's a problem. And now you can structure those in different ways. We very often will do right off the bat a 2-tier retainer. It's pre-litigation, it's a certain amount. Maybe you get it settled. Maybe you send some demand letters. And then immediately in there, it's before we will initiate litigation or before we will appear and defend in a lawsuit or have any obligation to appear and defend a lawsuit for you, you have to pay an additional retainer on top of that. And that may be a way to get it in the door and really evaluate. And a lot of the times you'll know through that first retainer, the first tier of the retainer, are they going to be good or are they not? And then you'll have a little bit more of credit history to know if they're going to be good to work with going forward.
That is a really good point about making those two tiers. That's definitely something that I personally have struggled with in mine, because you get people that are always asking like, well, can we do a smaller retainer? Or, you know, we'll do smaller this month, larger next month. And you want to help them, but you also need to make sure you're making money, which really brings us into our next part. We're moving on from technology, although you could also relate this to it, but budgeting for management. Budgeting is so important. I read a book last year called Profit First, which talked about really focusing on how much profit you want, take that off the top and make sure that your costs are under that. And that's one of the ways to learn how to budget. What do you all do as firm managers? What do you do to create your budgets and to live by your budgets? Bill, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. So just a little bit of history of the firm. As was mentioned, I worked at a large 400-person firm when I was a young associate. Then as a mid-level associate was at a boutique firm. They handle finances in a very different way. And then when I came over, I wasn't a partner, so I didn't actually know kind of how all the sausage was made, and have learned a lot. I've had a lot of mentors and consultants and other stuff to be able to kind of understand how we put these things together. But like a lot of things, there's nothing sexy about creating some numbers. I think what you had just mentioned about setting a profit and then backing from there, it really makes sense. Like what do I need to take home is one, but what do I want to take home, right? To take on the stress of a certain number of clients, or maybe there's a season or a couple of years when you're going to really devote a lot of time and build something up and stock a lot of money away. But if you don't know where you want to end up, you're never going to get there. So setting those markers up front are critical. And we do a lot of back end. We have a very complicated, well, I wasn't complicated, but a complex and robust platform that we use. It's really just an Excel spreadsheet, but that we have built over the years, where we do our planning off of that. We use that quarterly to make sure we're running against our numbers. Our administrative staff also looks at that on a weekly basis to make sure that we're staying on track with our expenditures. But a lot of it is also just being realistic and understanding you're not, are you going to work 2,000 hours? Okay. You said worked. Does that mean build? And if you build them, how much are you going to collect on them? Right? How many times did you take no retainer and then got burned on the bill, right? And what are the procedures you have in place to make sure those work? So a lot of it is just some pretty basic. I will tell you, I'm not like a lot of lawyers. I'm not a math lawyer, so had to learn a lot of that. Learned a lot of Excel as well. But there's some really good guidance out there about what are the percentages that make sense. How much can you pay people? And how much can you pay yourself along the way at a certain rate? And does that make sense for your clients?
And Tony, I know that we talked about that over the phone about how to create a budget. What do you all do as a larger firm? Do you have a 5-year plan, a 1-year plan, a 10-year plan? How do you go about managing your costs?
Well, it's these are great questions. So, there's an old saying, we've all heard it, a penny saved is a penny earned, although I'll put an asterisk there because it doesn't take into consideration taxes. But but what we do is for a lot of these things that we're talking about here, and I'll include technology in that. And spoiler alert, I'll include some of the future questions in this. But a lot of these questions, the genesis for the answers, in my opinion, start holistically. You have to holistically look at your firm and find out who are we and what do we want to be? Who are we now and what do we want to be? And you have to come up with a strategic plan, and you have to come up with a tactical approach to implement that plan. And so all these decisions, like technology, are part of that, right? And so budgeting is part and parcel of that whole thing. And so a lot of people sit down and they say, well, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have a budget. We're gonna create a budget, and here it is. It's here, and they blow it like day one. And why? Well, because A, you may not have incorporated that into your overall plan, and B, do you really know how to do a budget? And a lot of people don't. I was blessed. Like I said, I was a computer science finance major in college, and so I got into the business world knowing a lot about finances and how that worked. A lot of lawyers don't. And if you don't, then you need to team up with somebody, either a law partner or partners or an office manager, somebody who does. Because I tell lawyers this all the time, if you want to be a good lawyer and be really good at your craft, there are ways to get there, right? If you want to be a successful lawyer, there are ways to get there. There are a lot of good lawyers that are not successful financially, and part of it is because they don't know how to budget. And so I know this is turning into a long answer, and I'm sorry about that, but in order to do it, you have to look at, like I said, it's strategically, where is it you want to be? What are you trying to accomplish? And you have to build a budget based around that. And you have to do something that is difficult for every lawyer on this planet: discipline. You have to be able to stick with that, and otherwise it's meaningless. So those are kind of my takeaways. I don't know if I even answered the question, but that's my thought. But I will say this, and we did talk about this a couple weeks ago, but paying yourself first is not only a smart thing to do in your firm, but in your own personal life. You know, we all have expenses personally. Pay yourself first. You know, when you get your check or your comp or whatever, put some of that first towards you before you start paying your bills. That's what I do. It works relatively well for me and for the firm.
I always do get a little upset when people are like, oh, I'm a lawyer, I don't do math, because I come from a math family and I like math and was required to take Fed tax and didn't mind it, other than reading the statutes. But so Ryan, let's go to you. First, are you a math person? And second, what do you do about budgeting, whether you're looking at your 1 year, 5 year plan for you as a partner or for the firm as a whole?
So don't hate me. I am far from a math person. However, there are calculators and there are spreadsheets and there are people that work with me that are really, really smart who can help me with that. As far as budgeting details go, I've only been a partner for about 4 weeks, so I'm still starting to figure all that stuff out. But my understanding is that there are kind of similar to the marketing arm. There's a group of people that kind of handle the budget committee, but I believe everything has to be voted on and passed by all the members. And so, for example, some pretty big proposed cuts came whenever COVID hit, because usually the firm is very generous about paying for travel, for CLEs and all sorts of things like that. And there are a bajillion opportunities for us to go to. Some pretty sweet places we can go to too. And we kind of put the kibosh on it. But it was necessary because everybody kept their jobs and the firm stayed in a very healthy spot. And the firm has a lot of reserves saved up. Additionally, one thing that is public is the deposits made for the firm every single day are sent out at 8 o'clock every single day. So we can see how much was put in the coffers at any given time by every single client that the firm has. So I think that is helpful too. And having a budget and sticking to it. I mean, the firm's been around for 30 some odd years. So obviously the starting place is usually, where did you go under or over last year? And what adjustments do we need to make? For example, at Gorns and May, we love to be able to celebrate our employees. They're really good about, throwing things for birthdays and work anniversaries and all that kind of stuff. And one thing we've started to look at is, okay, is it wise to celebrate 5 of these in a given month? Or do we want to try and do like that when we celebrate multiple people? So, and what would be more memorable? And you have to balance that between what is going to keep your group happy, therefore productive, but what's also going to, be the best thing for the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Taylor, there's one thing I was going to say is, sorry, I'm back. So one thing I was going to say is that some folks I know on the call are they're may be some solos or small firms, but there may be people in bigger firms, and maybe they're saying to themselves, well, what does the budget or the technology matter to me? Let me just kind of wrap that up real quick with a couple points, which is one, you've probably already experienced, if you're in a larger firm, when the partner says, I need the staff, they're not there for you. And if you learn that created a level of independence and reliability that will set you apart from your peers, not having to be, hand-fed. Not that you should do this all the time. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. But if you know how to do it, you give yourself more flexibility to be able to accomplish the goals you have. When it comes to a budget, early on, I got some advice from probably want to say 5th or 6th year lawyer who was like, the firm cares about you, but like anyone, everyone's kind of got to look out for themselves and their own families. So as a young lawyer, your job is to be working and learning and, billing hours and other stuff. And maybe some small percentage of that is going towards learning business development or marketing yourself. But figure out how you can invest your time in attending events or learning or becoming, a better lawyer or more well-known so that you can be appropriately top of mind for referrals. And sometimes that does mean there is some financial investment in that, right? Maybe it's you're saying, look, I'm going to invest $500 a month in taking people to lunch on my own dime, or I'm going to do those other things. And a lot of folks I hear are, younger, and they're like, well, I spent my business development budget. And I was like, okay, so you've got all the business you need then, right? They're like, well, no, not necessarily. It's like, okay, well, then just think about where you want to go. Again, you need to know. You don't want to just go spend
a really great point. And I don't have a smooth transition for this one, but Tony, one of the things that I wanted to bring up that you and I talked about was succession planning. You've recently, and I want to start with you being at a larger firm, succession planning there, and then move down, because it's going to be very different for each firm, whether you're a solo or a large firm.
So again, and not to sound like a broken record here, but a lot of it goes back to the strategic plan and what is the overall goal. I remember when I became president or managing part of the firm, we got everybody together and I had a talk, and the very first words out of my mouth were, I said my first agenda item is. And I wasn't, everyone thought I was trying to be funny, but which was kind of a joke. But the point is, you're always having to keep your eye on what the succession is going to be. You always have to keep in mind, like, what are the next steps. And the second thing I said to everybody is, my successor may be in this room or they may not be in this room. I don't know, but we have to keep your eye on it. And so I would definitely offer that up, which is you have to constantly be looking on the lookout and thinking about it. And it has to be part of your overall strategic plan. And you have to communicate. You don't.
Attorneys sometimes they know it was important. They realized it was important before, but they didn't. And I encourage this person to talk and just be very express. Just say, what is my future here? Like, what is the future of the firm? And they ended up having a really good conversation. And that person ended up deciding that it was a place that they wanted to stay, and it made the most sense. And I wish them the best in that. I would have liked to have that person, but it ended up being the best. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Ask them in an appropriate way, in an appropriate time. But it's okay for you to want to know those kinds of things. The other part I would say about kind of new employees, I mean, we have different thoughts, and there is the wait till you're so busy that you burst, and then there's the build it and they will come. We take a middle ground, which is kind of trending on what kind of work we have, strategic hires based on practice areas that will support existing clients and be, not only not conflicting, but really helpful. Can we sell each other's work and that kind of stuff, which is how we ended up bringing a tax attorney to support our corporate practice, how we ended up bringing labor and employment to support transactional and litigation, and growing in those natural ways. So, when you talk about the expense of a new employee, it really talks about, are you going to have the ability to know, can you push work onto them and then fill it back up? Do you have the time and the energy and the space and the expertise to be able to do that? we felt very confident about that very often. And so that's how we've been able to grow, but keep that growth managed. I've told a lot of the folks and people inside the firm and outside the firm know, I've said there are only so many cats that I want to herd as managing partner. And so we've reached about the size that the size of the ship that I want to captain, but would be happy to be if someone else wants to grow that at some point down the road. So we just a lot of conversations and making sure that people are on the same page so that everyone achieves what they want to inside of the firm.
Great. And Ryan, as a new partner, have you had the opportunity to do any hiring in terms of paralegals or other staff?
So I hired a new paralegal a couple months ago, and she's wonderful, and she helps out with my collections and AR. So that's another thing I would kind of revert back to and say that that's incredibly important. As far as other attorneys, I haven't had the opportunity yet, but we all just kind of know when it's time. For example, the partners are beginning to outnumber the associates. People can't afford everybody's hourly rate, so you need somebody who you can feed those cases to keep the cases coming in the door. And so that's kind of what generates it in our practice. And as a practical matter too, the firm's philosophy, or at least as it was told to me when I was first hired, is when you hire an associate, you're looking to bring somebody on who will be a partner one day. Now, we're not an up or out firm necessarily, but time catches up with us all, right? And that's the goal, is to make sure the firm keeps running into the future. So we scrutinize very heavily in our hiring process, and we don't post anything that we're looking for a job necessarily. We kind of look for it in the sense of, oh, I had a case against this person, and people may send that an email and say, hey, what do y'all think of this person? What have you had any experience, good, bad, or indifferent? And the vote has to be unanimous in order to bring somebody on. So that way everybody's voice is heard. If one person says no dice, then we'll have.
That's great. And we're getting close to our time. It's almost 1 o'clock. So I want to kind of combine my last two questions. And Ryan, I'll start with you. One, how do you fit it all into 24 hours? Everything we've talked about, how do you fit it into 24 hours? And also, is there a book or a group, a forum, anything you recommend to young lawyers, especially solo small firm lawyers, that help people manage their practice?
So I'll answer the second question first. TYLA has a bunch of really great resources on their website. They've got a really group of awesome podcasts, especially that are being recorded now, called Young Gunners, which I highly recommend anybody listen. I hear the editing is phenomenal on the podcast. I'm doing the editing for the podcast. And as far as fitting everything in, for me, I'm a firm believer in, obnoxiously sticking to routine. So I get up at 5, I go to the gym every morning, but I get to the office at 8 and I leave at 5 every single day. And I've got twins that are 2 years old. So when I get home, I do not look at my phone from the second I get home at about 5:30 every day until they go down to bed at 8 p.m. And that is my family time. There's no reason for me to look at an email, because all it's going to do is stress me out. If it is important, somebody will call me, and it can usually wait for the next day. I feel like every time I have broken that rule, I regret it. I budget my time really, really well. I don't really take breaks throughout the day, just so I can really, get in and get out. And as an associate, I outbill almost everybody else in the firm, and I never worked a weekend. I never worked weird hours. So I would just say learning how to manage your time effectively will get you there.
That's great. Bill, how about you as managing partner? How do you fit it all into 24 hours? And do you recommend any forums or books for young lawyers to read?
One thing that I would mention is good for a lot of good perspectives, is particularly focused on management and being managed, and teamwork, is Radical Candor by, I think it's Kim Scott. It's a technology executive who talks about how you can give criticism, receive criticism, and really grow cohesively as a team that has to have honest conversations. A lot of, I think, what we talked about is making sure that you're on the same page, that everyone's moving in the same direction. You've got to start that from the beginning. If you hire someone who wants to go in a completely different direction, it's going to create friction. It's going to create problems. So the more you're on the same page and the more you're headed in the same direction, things will be better. One of the things that I strive for and don't always do a great job is to focus on doing the things that I should as opposed to the things that I can. There are so many things that we are blessed to be able to do as attorneys. We've gone through gauntlets of education and practice to be where we are. People look up to us and they want to talk to us all the time about our advice and our, we're generally well respected despite the lawyer jokes and everything else, but people turn to us. And because we have so many opportunities, we can often choose third, fourth, fifth, or God forbid, further down the list priorities over the things that really matter. So setting those goals as an organization, setting the goals for yourself will help you understand, do I want to attend the CLE? Do I want to spend time with this person? Do I want to spend time with nobody? Do I want to focus on myself? And only by knowing, again, where you want to go, will you get there. And I highly recommend then you'll know when you're choosing your time, you'll know, like Ryan said, it's 5 o'clock. I'm choosing my number one priority. I'm choosing my family, and it will work out. There is a lot of time. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So if you step in a way that's planned towards your goals, you're more likely to win every day of the week.
Thanks. And Tony, I'm going to give you the last closing statement before I talk to everyone about the CLE credit.
So I would echo what Ryan Bill said about the work-life balance thing that they probably know a lot more about than I do. So I agree on that. As far as books, I'm a firm believer in educating yourself on the business side of law, just like you educate yourself on the legal side of law. There are 2 books that I think are must reads. One is called The Successful Lawyer by Gerald Riskin, and the other one is called Rainmaking Made Simple by Mark Mariah. And I'd be happy to email those out. Anyone who has any questions or wasn't writing that down, definitely good reads. Thank you.
Great. And we talked about managing a practice management forum as well, correct?
Yeah. There's a organization. It's called Managing Partner Forum, and I think the website is like managingpartnerforum.com or something. But it's a group out of Atlanta, and it's a good group. It's run by a bunch of former lawyers, and they do everything from consulting for law firms to help them out. They do a lot of counseling for lawyers, but they also have a lot of good symposiums. They have a lot of good resources on their website. They have a couple really cool annual conferences for managing partners. I highly recommend them, definitely check that out. It's a great. And most of the resources on the website are free.
Oh, great. Well, that's always nice, especially for solo small firms. It's really great to have free resources. So we're getting down to we're over time a little bit, but I just want to say thank you so much for being our sources of knowledge and giving advice and being available to the young lawyers here in Dallas. We will be emailing out the CLE credit. There's a new change with the state bar that it's not going to be in the videos. Sherry is going to send you those emails if you're looking for the code for getting CLE credit for this. And once again, I want to say thank you to our veterans, and everyone have a happy Veterans Day, and also a happy birthday to Bill. And thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
Taylor.
Thank you.